Hey, 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 how are ya? Yes, ma'am. Ain't nobody on there, but I'm on there. There's somebody. Who I got? Hey, 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 TikTok. I went to leave, so that's cool. So I'm off fat tonight. You did good. I appreciate you letting me know. Hey, Jim. Jim's gone. Oh, yeah. It may take a little while before I get enough built up. I mean, I actually have like 2,400 followers on TikTok, but that doesn't mean anything. I've learned. And people come in, see what's going on, and then they leave. So you have to pay attention to them or they really in a hurry. Oh, I don't know why my big bags are starting to itch all of a sudden. Oh, I got home today and I could not. I mean, actually, I didn't even make it home. I made it to the parking lot at work and off come the underwear bra because I was dying. Why the fuck do I wear an underwear bra? I mean, I need to, obviously, but why? I mean, it's awful. It's awful. And it's a beer night. Hello, 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 TikTok. Hey, LN. What should I call you? Because LN just sounds funky. I mean, that's kind of hard to say. I'll call you LN if it's what you want me to call you. Or I can call you Ms. Manning if you'd rather me do that. But if you have an easier name to go by, that would be great. Oh, gosh. Well, I had to go back in the office today. And I've only been in a half a dozen times in the past 16 months. And I had to go to the doctor this morning too. So I thought, oh, I'll just kind of dress up a little, you know. I mean, my gosh, I got makeup on. And believe it or not, I did fix my hair this morning. And I bought some new bras and I thought and I still think they're big enough. It's just they got underwire and the the side boob and the under boob where when you slouch the wire hits the ribs. Oh my gosh. I was dying. And you know what the stupid thing is? I actually took a sports bra with me. Like, it's not this one, but it's this style. So, I took a sports bra with me, but did I put it on? No, I didn't change out. I just continued to suffer in silence. Hey, everybody on TikTok, how are you? I'm getting ready to start reading here in about another minute or two. I'm going to start reading um, Healing His Heart by L.N. Manning. And it is a shifter werewolf is it werewolf book. So So please stay, join me. It'll take about 45 minutes to an hour to read, so it won't be that bad. It'll be just another minute or two. And if you've never heard me read, I would love to for feedback and things I can do better, and maybe someday I can become a narrator. Get to be good at it and get to where I'm not too lazy to edit audiobooks. So, but yeah, I would love for you to join me. So, um, I also have a TikTok going on at the same time that I have this. And so if any of my YouTube people are having problems like it's freezing up or something, because sometimes on YouTube it does that, try TikTok and see if it's a little bit easier. So sometimes that does a little bit easier. Alrighty, as people are joining on, I'm going to go ahead and start reading. So, chapter 1. Oh, where's my glasses? Not the ones holding my hair back either. Bruce Lawson tilted his head, his eyes closed as he raised his hands to let the rhythm of the music move his body. His long blonde hair swayed with his hips as he moved to the music. This was what he needed. He needed to feel, needed to forget. Bruce was the epitome of a twink. For a wolf shifter, he was smaller than most, said only 5'6" tall and only weighing 120 pounds. That's pretty much me when I graduated high school. I'm 5'6" and I weighed 120 pounds when I graduated high school, but still, shifters, his muscles were well defined. Hey TikTok. His skin was fair and it contrasted nicely with the skin tight black leather pants and shoulder harness he was wearing. He loved the feel of the leather against his body and the way it looked in the flashing lights of the club. Hey, Vincy, is anybody hollered it into a hard cock as a voice whispered in his ear? Hey, beautiful, you've been driving me nuts for an hour now. How about we get out of here and find a quiet place to get to know each other? He turned to look at the man plastered against his back. As he moved, the smell of cheap whiskey and stale cigarettes had his wolf gagging in his mind. The man was large and heavy-set, with a round face, slightly bulging eyes, and scruffy beard. Bruce hated the smells coming from this man. They reminded him of... No, he wasn't going there. Trying to be polite, Bruce stepped back from the man, aiming to put some space between the smell. No, thank you. I'm just here to dance, he told the man over the pulsing music. He started to turn around when the man grabbed his wrist in his large sausage-like fingers. Bruce winced as he turned back to the stranger, trying to pull away from him. I should have went up the next higher voice on that one, I think. The man tightened his hold on Bruce's wrist as he tried to tug Bruce closer to his chest. Come on, cutie. It won't take long, the guy said as he jerked again on Bruce's wrist, harder this time, trying to drag him from the dance floor. Bruce's wolf moved in his mind, not liking the aggressiveness of the man. He rotated his hand and latched onto the arm holding him, almost painfully. Bruce's enhanced shifter strength came in handy, and he squeezed the wrist of the man to force his release. The stranger tightened his grip, trying to show Bruce he had superior strength before letting go of Bruce's arm and pushing him away. When the man released him, Bruce turned back toward the dance floor, trying to make his way back into the center, away from the man. Over the music, he heard the man's displeasure. Cock teasing, bitch! Bruce wasn't lying to the man. He was only there to dance and to try to forget about how much his life had changed over the past few months. He had left his birth pack, left everything he had ever known, and followed his friends, helping his new alpha, Jonathan, and his fated mate, Ethan, start their own pack, the Crescent Edge Pack. Now, there was another mated pair why he needed to get out to dance and try to forget. Not that he wasn't happy for his friends, he just wanted a mate of his own. His friend Edward had met his mate, Bulldog, when they had gotten back to Jonathan's house after their liberation. But Edward had suffered because of their bond in the beginning. He almost lost his life to the dreaded mating curse when Bulldog initially rejected him to spare him from a past that had been hunting him. Bulldog had finally come to his senses and claimed Edward, only to have his worst fears come true. Bulldog was not only a bear shifter, but more. His mother, when he had shifted at 15 in front of their whole guild, he was expelled from the community. When the guild had come looking for Bulldog, their new pack and a group of their friends stood against them to stop the guild from killing Bulldog and Edward. Now, for those that haven't read her books before, this is book 3 in the series. So if this is just a quick roundup, catch up on what's been happening in books 1 and 2. So you'll probably want to go back and read the first 2 books to catch up. Bruce had a crush on Martin, one of the men who had come to help. He had seen Martin shift and take off to patrol the Packlands as they waited for the attack from the guild. Bruce had thought he would follow him and spend time with the man who reminded him of an ancient Native American warrior. He had barely entered the woods surrounding the house when he was grabbed. The leader of the guild had beaten him bloody. The leader of the guild had beaten him bloody, almost to the point of unconsciousness, before dragging him out in front of his pack and kicking him to the ground. So when Bruce told the man he was only there to dance, he meant it. He only wanted to dance, to release his fears and pain to the beat of the music and let the bass take him to another plane of existence where there were no nightmares and nothing to hurt him. Bruce danced to the center of the dance floor, his long hair swaying behind him as he was enveloped in the throng of bodies once again. The scent of sex, testosterone, and men wreaked havoc on his senses, but he didn't mind. To Bruce, nothing smelled better than the scent of a horny man. He continued to move with the music, head back and eyes closed, as he lost himself in the beat. The intensity of the throbbing bass made the frantic movements of the club goers kick up a notch. His cock started to harden when the song changed. Bruce knew the club would be closing soon, but he wasn't ready for the night to end. Not yet. Chapter 2. He crouched down a little more on the rooftop across the street from the dance club. Vincy, I see you're saying it's freezing up. They have been working on our internet, so that may be part of it. That's maybe why it's been freezing up for the past or all week, is because they've been working on our internet and they didn't tell us till yesterday. So, which is why I went in office today. So I apologize. For those that have a TikTok account, you may want to go over there and listen. It might be a little easier to follow me from over there. But if you don't get a chance to watch this through, it'll be saved on my YouTube channel, and when you rewatch it, it won't have the freeze ups in it. Chapter 2. He crouched down a little on the rooftop across the street from the dance club, trying to stay in the shadows. For the past 100 years, Reese Edmond had been pulled toward a small town named Crescent Edge, but with no clue as to why. He was in bed, fast asleep inside his small apartment that night when his senses started to scream at him, forcing him to get dressed and head out into the night. Reese had run across the rooftops, following the strange pull in his chest, still not understanding what the powerful feeling was. He stopped across the street from a nightclub when the pulling sensation eased. He hid in the shadows near the edge of the roof, watching, waiting for something, anything to happen which would explain what was going on. Where did I get that? The music lowered in volume, signaling the close of business. Small groups of men started to slowly exit the club, with single stragglers who didn't find anyone to spend the night with following behind. Reese looked over all the men leaving, but felt nothing toward any of them that would explain the pull. Reese closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. The music might have softened, but the headache it was giving him was only getting worse. He was just about to leave and head back to his bed when the pulling sensation intensified once again. He gasped, covering his chest with his hand when it felt as if his heart was being pulled through his chest wall. Reese opened his eyes, searching for the source of his body's reaction. A small man in a harness and tight leather pants walked out alone. His long, thick, blonde hair surrounded him like a veil over his shoulders and streaming down his back to his hips. Reese had to blink his eyes several times to make sure he was actually seeing the gorgeous man and not a figment of his overly tired brain. When he opened them again, the gorgeous man was still there, and he was glorious. Taillights flashed when the small man unlocked the door with his key fob. As the man opened the door, Reese was starting to curse himself for deciding to run the rooftops instead of bringing his car. Then a heavy-set man stepped up to the driver's door of the car. The large, disheveled man leaned against the door, blocking the small one from getting in. Reese could feel the crimson glow his eyes gave off when his emotions rose close to the surface. But as he watched the blond man take up a defensive position against the larger man, Reese's anger skyrocketed. He couldn't hear what was being said between the two men, but the body language was unmistakable. The man was angry. He wanted into his car, but the larger man wasn't getting the hint. A growl ripped from his throat as Reese moved to the edge of the rooftop, looking for a place he could jump down and not be seen by any humans. The pull from his chest suggested the smaller man with the blonde halo of hair could be his mate. But the only way for his type of shifter to know for sure was through sex. He was just about to jump down to the street when he heard the young man yell at the person blocking his door. All right, I'm going up an octave higher for Bruce's voice because that was just too low, I think. I said no. If you haven't figured that out yet, it means I don't want anything to do with you. The heavyset man lunged at the smaller man, but to Reese's amazement, the blonde sidestepped him. The large man tried to stop his momentum and turned to lunge again. The blonde man raised his slim, leather-clad leg and kicked the heavy-set aggressor square in the chest, sending him sprawling to the ground and rolling a few feet away. Reese's jaw dropped to his chest in complete disbelief at the power behind the young man's kick. He waited to see what else the little cutie was going to do before he approached him. Reese just looked down at the man, fighting to get his breath back as he tried to stand up before the blonde turned on his heel, opened his driver door, started his car, and left. It took a minute for Reese's brain to catch up with what was happening. The blonde was driving away, and Reese didn't know where he lived or how he could follow him unseen after leaving his car back at his apartment. Reese leapt off the rooftop and landed silently on the sidewalk below. He made his way over to where the car had been parked. The man who had tried to prevent the blonde from leaving had gotten to his feet and left the spot after the car had driven away. He breathed in deeply at the last place the gorgeous blonde man had been. Hey TikTok, welcome to the Crazy Show. I am reading from His Healing Heart, the Shifter book by L.N. Manning. He breathed in deeply at the last place the gorgeous blonde man had been. He sifted through the smells in the alley until he found the one that he was sure he was looking for. Fresh spring blossoms and summer rain. Reese's eyes rolled back in his head, a groan coming from deep in his throat as his cock hardened immediately. If he had been younger and not so in control of his actions, he would have dropped his pants right here in the alley to release the coil of tension that was now coursing through his body. But Reese was well over 400 years old, and that particular shine had become jaded long ago. If he had ignored the pull from his chest and not left his tribe, he would be considered an elder, a leader, even though he still looked like he was in his early 30s. Reese closed his eyes and focused on the pull that was, since he laid eyes on the blond man, almost drawing a line between the slim man and himself. Reese looked around before heading further down the alley where it was darker. He allowed his wings to emerge from his back. They were large, wide, and powerful. Slowly, the dark, gray, thin, leathery wings unfurled. He needed to know who that man was, where he lived, and if he was his mate. Reese almost stumbled when a thought crossed his mind. If the man were his mate, he would only know once he fucked him. So how the hell would he go about doing that? I'm Reese, and I think you're my mate. Bend over, please, and let me fuck you so I can find out. Yeah, that would definitely work. Work myself into a jail cell? Reese snorted at that. He didn't know who the man was, where he came from, or even if he had someone in his life. The crimson glow from Reese's eyes intensified at his last thought. No matter what, if the man were his mate, he would soon know what it was like to be mated to a man like Reese. When his powerful wings were fully extended, they gave a forceful flap, taking him into the air. He allowed the pull in his chest to guide him as he silently flew, not knowing where he was going or why the pull was so strong. When the sensation eased, Reese found himself 20 miles outside of Crescent Edge, surrounded by woods. He focused once again on the tugging sensation coming from his body, searching for any sign that the blond man was nearby. As Reese looked around, he noticed a driveway almost hidden to the street, but not to his shifter eyes. Reese landed on the street and walked silently up the drive, careful not to make a noise. As Reese rounded a bend in this drive, a house came into view. That wasn't what had caught Reese's eye. Parked in front of the house was the car the slim man in the delicious leather pants had driven away in. Chapter 3. Bruce paced the confines of his small bedroom at the pack house. He didn't know what had him wound so tightly that his mind wouldn't shut off long enough for him to fall asleep. He just figured his blood was still boiling from the drunk man who had tried to grab him as he left the club earlier. He had taken a long, hot shower when he had gotten home, wanting desperately to wash off the stench of liquor clinging to his body. With every lap he had made around his bed, Bruce's nerves felt like they were being pulled tighter and tighter. He needed to get out, needed to run from everything on four paws for a while. Bruce left his first floor bedroom, heading for the front door so he could shift and run. Where are you headed to? Okay. Where are you headed to? I'm just throwing the third voice out there. Bruce almost jumped out of his skin when Joseph asked a question from the kitchen. He was so caught up in his own mind, he hadn't even noticed anyone was awake, let alone 10 feet from him and sitting on the bar stool in the kitchen. I need to run, he told his friend and fellow packmate, not really wanting to go into details. You'll let me know if there is something wrong, right? Joseph asked, a look of concern on his face. Bruce smiled at his friend. The bonds that held this new pack together ran deep. It warmed him to no end to know he had people to turn to if he needed help. Unlike their lives before, they had moved to join the Crescent Edge pack. The only pack mate who wasn't born into the Broken Oaks pack was Bulldog. He was part bear shifter and part mage. The alpha of Broken Oaks was a sadistic and greedy man who had thrown his own son, Jonathan, out of the pack when he found out Jonathan was gay. The former alpha and his circle of enforcers had run the pack through fear, intimidation, beatings, and even murder. When the new alpha, Lucas, had challenged for the alpha position, the head enforcer had interfered in the fight. He stabbed Lucas in the side with a silver lace knife, damn near killing him. Thankfully, Lucas's brother Marcus had gotten him out of there alive, and they landed on Jonathan's doorstep. Once Lucas had healed, Jonathan had called upon his friends to go with them to ensure a fair fight for the alpha position of the Broken Oaks pack. Lucas had defeated the cruel alpha, killing him along with his circle of enforcers who had terrorized the pack members for decades. Even though the reign of terror was now over in the Broken Oaks pack, Bruce, along with four of his friends, decided to follow Jonathan to create the Crescent Edge pack. Bruce closed the distance between him and Joseph, hugging him tightly, mentally shaking himself out of his thoughts. I will, he said as he pulled out of the hug. Bruce plastered a fake smile on his face, hoping Joseph wouldn't see past the mask he had pulled on. He turned and headed to the front door, stepping through before gently closing the door behind him. Bruce walked down the front steps as he pulled his shirt over his head, folding it and setting it on the top step. His pants quickly followed. Once he was naked, Bruce shook out his arms, closed his eyes, and allowed his wolf to take control. As he opened his eyes, the world around him was sharper, crisper. The dirt beneath his paws was cool and soft. Bruce had to pull back tightly on his control. His wolf was elated to be free again, wanting to howl his excitement. He shook out his pale gray and white fur before he sniffed the air around him, making sure there was no danger around. In his human form, he was small and lean for a shifter, whereas most shifters were tall, muscular, and thick. Bruce's wolf form matched his human form, short, leanly muscled, and nowhere near as powerful as the other wolves in his new pack. He took off at a swift pace toward the far side of the packlands, weaving in and out through the trees and jumping over fallen logs. He wouldn't allow his wolf to howl and wake the rest of the pack, but he let him yip it a couple of times in the silence of the darkness when far enough away from the house. This is what I needed. I should have done this a long time ago. Bruce thought as he turned to follow a path just inside the tree line that dictated the borders of the property. He hadn't shifted in over a month because flashbacks of fist and booted feet would drag him back to a couple of months ago and his childish decision. He slowed his pace as the pond, which sat in the far back corner of the property, came into view. It was one of his favorite places on the packland. Large boulders set at one end with smaller ones perched on top of the larger ones. A small stream trickled through the rocks on one side. It was peaceful, serene. Bruce's small wolf crouched down at the water's edge, his tongue lapping at the cool liquid. When he had his full fill, the wolf stepped back and shifted into his human form. Bruce stretched his arms above his head, arching his back as the bones of his spine popped, making him moan at the pleasurable feeling. He walked over to the boulders, gingerly sat down, and reclined his back against the smaller ones. The night sky was clear, the stars dancing like diamonds above his head. Bruce closed his eyes, folding one arm behind his head as the other hand slowly traveled over his naked chest. Bruce tweaked his left nipple with his roaming hand, making him gasp and arch his back. He slowly caressed his hairless chest, enjoying the smoothness of his own skin. Most shifters had a sprinkling of hair, but not Bruce. The only hair on his body was on top of his head and at his eyebrows. He was a twink, always had been, and he enjoyed every minute of it. Well, he had enjoyed it ever since his former alpha had been killed and he had joined the Crescent Edge pack. The entire pack was made up of gay men, all wolves except Bulldog. Ever since he had left his birth pack, Bruce and his friends were free to be who they were, and Bruce had reveled in the freedom he now had. He might have gone a little overboard, but it was his choice, and that was all that mattered. He was going to dance clubs every other night and have sex with any man he chose. His hand skimmed lower down his body, over the peaks and valleys of his defined abdomen, before wrapping his hand around the hard silkiness of his cock. He moaned softly as he ran his fingers through the pre-cum gathered on the head, using it to aid his movements as he leisurely stroked himself. All right, who's horny up there? I know you girls are horny because, I can feel the heat coming off the screen over here. It's crazy. Do we need to get our hot flash kits out? Come on, girls. Let's get it together here. Chapter 4. It took all Reese's willpower to rein in his emotions and his body's reaction to the small shifter giving him one hell of a show. He has silently followed the wolf as he ran before climbing into a tree near the pond to watch him. The pull from his chest was intense, but he wasn't ready to reveal himself to the wolf yet. Reese was a gargoyle shifter, an ancient one at that. They were so rare, he could count on one hand how many other gargoyles he had come across in the last 100 years and still have 4 fingers left over. A gargoyle shifter had the ability to hide his scent, move silently, and be seen only when he wanted to be seen in both of their forms. Those abilities were helping him out right now as he watched the most beautiful man he had ever seen stroke himself next to a pond surrounded by woods. Reese's eyes were glued to where the wolf's hand was wrapped around his hard cock. The moans and gasps coming from him echoed around them, tempting Reese to go to him. But he was a thinker, a planner, a strategist. He was not the type to shoot from the hip or hope for the best. He needed answers to some questions before he approached the small wolf. Reese needed to check out who this man was, who else lived in the house the little wolf walked out of, and why he was reacting like he was to his presence. Reese's fingers itched to reach out, to feel if the blonde's skin was as soft as it looked, and offer to help him out with that hard cock in his hand. His own cock was hard and throbbing behind his zipper, and Reese was fairly sure he was going to have a new zipper tattoo along the length of his dick. The wolf moaned as he pulled on his cock faster, adding a twist of his wrist as he went. His other hand trailed down his body, cupping his balls and rolling them in his hand. As he watched, the blonde's back bowed off the rock as white streaks painted his chest. Reese bit back a growl which had threatened to rip from his throat and give away his position in the tree. But he couldn't stop his talons from extending from his fingertips as he tightened his grip on the large branch he was crouched on. He could feel his own cock licking at the display from the man, still trying to catch his breath on the rocks. If Reese didn't know better, he might think the beautiful twink knew he was there and deliberately put on a show for him. But he knew that wasn't possible. He watched as the young man stood, walked over to the pond, and dove in. When his head broke through the water, Reese could have sworn he was glowing due to the way the moonlight reflected off the droplets of water clinging to the man's skin. He shifted when he stepped out of the water and slowly headed back in the direction of the house. After a few minutes, Reese jumped down from the tree he was perched in, landing on his feet on the ground without a sound, not even a leaf falling from the tree. He walked over to the rock that was now empty, laying his hand on it. Reese didn't understand what the connection to the other man was yet, but he would find out. He needed to find out soon, or his balls were going to turn a bright shade of blue. Then they were at the brighter shade of blue than they were at the moment, right before they fell off. He looked toward the path the wolf had followed, his cock begging for release. He couldn't do it, though. If he did, the scent of his cum would be left in a wolf pack's territory, which would be disastrous for both him and the small wolf. Bruce was agitated, and his wolf was prowling around the back of his mind, growling and snapping his jaws. It was giving him a big damn headache. But what was really getting on his nerves was Bruce had no clue what the hell had set his wolf off in the first place. It had taken him a couple of hours to finally fall asleep after his run last night. Fighting with his wolf to calm down was draining. Bruce stumbled into the kitchen, heading straight for the coffee, wondering if his pack mates would find him drinking it straight from the pot. Joseph and Jerry were sitting on stools at the breakfast bar, their hands wrapped around their own mugs of coffee. "Good morning, sunshine," Joseph voice dripped with sugary, sweet sarcasm. Ugh, was all Bruce could manage after only a couple of hours' rest, and not peaceful at rest at that. You look like shit, Jerry stated, not one to mince words or sugarcoat anything. Bruce carried Bruce cared deeply for all the pack members, each of them holding a special place in his heart. But the lack of sleep and the non-stop and pounding of his head had Bruce's nerves frayed almost to the point of snapping. Thanks, Bruce said curtly as he rolled his eyes, taking his first sip of the strong brew. Okay, maybe strong wasn't the right word. As the first taste hit his stomach, Bruce's eyes popped open, and he could have sworn somebody had first stuck him with a cattle prod with the jolt that came just from the small amount of his coffee. Bruce lowered his mug, looking closely at the dark liquid before turning his wide eyes to Joseph. What the hell? He asked as he took another mouthful from the mug. Joseph shrugged. I heard you pacing, then tossing and turning last night. Figured you would need some stronger than normal coffee this morning. The gesture from his packmate almost choked up Bruce. Wolves needed packs for protection for themselves or their mates, and it also helped keep the individual wolves sane. It was extremely easy for a wolf without a pack to turn rogue. If that happened, they had to be put down. Rogues generally turn violent toward anything and everything, including other wolves and shifters, and even humans ignorant of the paranormal world around them. Bruce walked around the breakfast bar, planting a kiss on Joseph's cheek before he took a seat on the empty bar stool next to him. The three men sat in comfortable silence. The only sound was that of the coffee mugs being set down on the countertop. Any plans for today? Jerry asked, almost keeping a protective eye on the smaller members of the pack. Bruce shrugged his shoulders. I don't know. I went to a club last night, and ever since, my wolf has been prowling in my mind and under my skin. I can't figure out what's going on with him. Both men turned to look at him with matching, questioning looks, making Bruce stare into his coffee. When did he start acting like that? Joseph asked with a very wolf-like tilt of his head. Almost as soon as I stepped out of the club to come home. Was all Jerry said before Jonathan and Ethan, his alpha and alpha mate, came down the stairs. Let me know if I read too far. I usually try to read till 9 o'clock. So let me know if I read too far. It still says I'm only 11%. So I don't think I'm giving much away. But if I get too far into it, just tell me to whoa. Put up a bunch of emojis or something. I don't know. Something to catch my eye. Chapter 5. Reese watched the rustic house from his hiding place. He had gone home confused and intrigued. On one hand, thank you. He had gone home confused and intrigued. On one hand, he when he laid eyes on the wolf, even if he didn't point at his throat when he wasn't in view. Since he had been watching the house that evening, Reese had seen no less than 5 different men come and go. All the men were wolves, so he had guessed correctly that this was a wolf pack house. He had no clue how he could approach the small blonde wolf. It wasn't like he could walk up to the pack house and knock on the door. That would definitely get him. Accidentally bump into the man. The front door opened and out stepped the man that had consumed his thoughts all day. He was dressed in tight leather pants again, but this time the wolf had paired them with a tight mesh sleeveless shirt that left nothing to the imagination. As Reese watched, the man stopped in the pale glow of the porch light as he turned his face to the moonlight. His hair glowed like a flowing halo around his face and shoulders. He was beautiful, But there was something off, something that didn't sit well with Reese. The man's shoulders were hunched, his eyes blinked as he took a deep breath before walking down the porch steps and headed to the car he had been in the day before. The car backed out of his parking lot. Excuse me, where did that come from? Sorry about that. Oh, my hair's driving me crazy. Um, Reese waited until the car was out of sight before he released his wings and took to the air, flying. When the wolf was inside the club, Reese headed to his small apartment to change clothes. Having showered and shaved before putting on a pair of leather pants and a tight t-shirt, Reese opened the door to his car and headed to the club, hoping to find a way to get closer to the intriguing man. He parked near the young wolf's car and headed inside. The music was loud and rhythmic, the beat reverberating through his chest. It wasn't something he could handle for long, so he headed to a corner of the club. He closed his eyes, centered his thoughts, and pulled back on his shifter senses. He was able to shift the music to the back of his mind to the level of white noise instead of the booming beat that threatened to unsheath his talons. Oh, please tell me how to do that, because I really need to be able to do that, like with people, not just music. Especially since I got to start working in the office, so I'm not looking forward to it. Reese opened his eyes when the music faded to the back, quickly scanning the crowded club for the man he came to find. Through the flashing lights on the dance floor, he caught a glimpse of a veil of blonde hair near the center. There, in the middle of the dance floor, he found his prey. His head was tilted back, his eyes closed, his body moving with the music. The man moved with the beat as if it through the crowd of humans, through the flashing lights and the non-stop music. Reese could see the lines of stress that marred the beautiful man's face. He wondered what weighed so heavily on the man's mind to cause such lines. Reese watched the man dance as if Reese were entranced, glorying at the unmitigated sex appeal the young shifter unknowingly oozed. What about that one? A voice a few feet away from Reese asked, his shifter hearing easily picking up the words. Yeah, he'll do. I bet men would pay big money to fuck his ass. Reese didn't know what the men were talking about, and it wasn't his business, so he pushed them out of his thoughts. A few minutes later, he watched the blonde wolf walk off the dance floor and head through a door on the far side of the club. He stood from his seat against the wall and made his way through the mass of bodies moving and grinding together. Reese saw red. He had heard the saying before and thought it was just some bullshit description used to attempt to describe a sudden anger in a character. But it wasn't. In that moment, Reese found out just how accurate that saying, seeing red, truly was. The door opened into a bathroom, which Reese had expected. What he hadn't expected was to see the beautiful blonde man fighting with two humans. The humans were trying to force the wolf's pants off while trying to hold on to the man at the same time. Reese closed the door behind him as he pulled up to his full height of 6'4" and squared his shoulders. Release him, he growled, his voice low and deadly. The larger of the two men turned to face him. Get the fuck out of here, the man angrily told him before he turned back to his partner. I said release him, Reese said again, trying to hold on to his human form. The human turned around again, pulling out a knife from his pocket. And I said, get the fuck out. So leave before you end up hurt. The man's threat was just as weak as the man himself, so Reese couldn't help but laugh. The human had no idea death was staring him in the face. He lunged at Reese, slashing the blade at his face. Reese wasn't going to play the stupid human games this man wanted to play. Quicker than a blink of an eye, Reese shot forward, wrapping one hand around the man's throat and the other around the wrist of the hand holding the knife. The human's eyes were wide and frantically looking around. Reese tightened his grip on the wrist in his hand until he heard the bone snap and the knife drop. He tossed the man aside into the tiled wall. The man landed on the floor, cradling his broken arm, howling in pain. Reese turned his attention to the second man that had been holding the wolf, and now his own knife held tightly to the throat of the young man. We are going to walk out of here now, or I will slit this twink's fucking throat. Reese rolled his eyes as if he would allow these men to kidnap the wolf at the twinkle that lit the wolf's eyes. If he had blinked, Reese would have missed the quick, controlled movements of the young man. He grabbed the hand with the knife as he twisted his body around the human's. The wolf pulled the man's arm behind his back, wrenching it high up on his back. The human tried to elbow him and grab behind him to force the wolf to release him, but it only made the small man wrench. Let's see. I looked off and lost my place. Sorry about that. The human tried to elbow him and grab him. Could be heard. The human dropped to his knees, crying out as his arm hung limply at his side. Fucking bastards! Oh, wait a minute. That would be, okay, that's Bruce. Fucking bastards! The wolf yelled at the two men, both still cradling their injured limbs, before turning his pale blue eyes on Reese. The pulling sensation that began this fascination with the wolf started again. Chapter 6. This may be my last chapter. It's going to be pretty close. Bruce stood there, staring at the man come to his rescue, unable to form words or thoughts as he looked at the man, at the most gorgeous hunk of a man he had ever seen. He stood a head and shoulders above Bruce, with short brown hair that shone in the low light of the bathroom. The man's eyes were the color of moss with flakes of red. They were beautiful. His shoulders were broad and tapered down to his narrow waist. His leather pants clung to the powerful thighs. The stranger held out his hand to Bruce, his fingers long and his palm wide, extending from a well-muscled forearm. "Come with me," the man said. The man's voice was thick with emotion and coarse like sandpaper, but it fell across Bruce's skin soft as silk. He slowly raised his hand, placing it into the stranger's. But this man wasn't a stranger. This was his mate. His mate's hand was warm and calloused as his fingers curled around Bruce's. The man turned and gently tugged him out of the bathroom, away from the bastards who had tried to rape him. Bruce was led through the club and out the front door, across the parking lot, and over to his own car. His mate leaned his back against his car, spreading his legs. He pulled Bruce forward, nestling him in between them. "What's your name?" Bruce shivered at his mate's voice. Bruce Lawson," he whispered. After all he had endured in his life, after hoping and praying to the gods for a mate of his own, Bruce's dreams had finally come true. "Yours?" His mate smiled down at him. "Reese Edmond." Bruce leaned in closer to smell the delicious aroma coming from Reese, who had come to his rescue. Reese smelled like a warm spring wind and lavender, and Bruce wanted to roll around in that scent forever. He could tell just by Reese's aura that he had an ancient soul, but Bruce couldn't figure out what the man really was. He wasn't a wolf. Bruce's mind cleared for just a moment, and a question popped into his head. "How did you know this was my car?" Reese looked for a second before he masked it. I've been pulled toward this city for over 100 years, not knowing why, until now." Bruce tilted his head to the side, looking questioningly at his newly found mate. "Well, that certainly didn't answer my question." He quirked an eyebrow up at the man. When his soon-to-be mate flashed him a mischievous smile, Bruce was sure he would melt into a puddle. "You're right. I didn't. The other night, I was asleep in my bed on the far side of town when a pull started in my chest, like someone or something was forcing me to follow the pull. So I got dressed and followed it. He brought me here to this same club. I watched you walk out, and the sensation started again, only it became more intense. So I thought I should follow you to figure out what the connection is between us and to keep you safe. That was not what I was expecting to hear, Bruce thought. Then the rest of his words took a hold in his brain. Wait, when a wolf finds their mate, we do it by smell. Back in that bathroom, as soon as you walked in, your smell hit me, and I knew you were my mate. Bruce was having a hard time trying to figure out the look on Reese's face. The man is a shifter, right? Should know about mates, shouldn't he? He thought. What are you? Bruce asked. Bruce wanted to know. It really didn't matter to him, but his pack would need to know. Reese cleared his throat before he spoke. I am a gargoyle. I have a hard time with that word, gargoyle. We are an ancient breed that normally no one would see or hear about. And you don't know what I am. You don't know that I'm your mate. The uncomfortable feeling surrounded Reese again. We only know for sure that we have found our mate when we have sex. So you've been following me like a stalker, watching me? Then then you show up at a dance club and help me out with a couple of bastards in the bathroom, all while not knowing why? Bruce couldn't help it. He started to laugh. One of those laughs that bordered on hysteria. Slowly, Bruce began to pull himself together enough to look up at his mate's face. Reese was wearing a look of confusion. With one last giggle, Bruce decided to lay everything out for the gargoyle and then wait and see what happened. I'm a wolf, and if he tells me you are my mate, the other half of our soul. I'm a wolf, and he tells me you are my mate, the other half of our soul. But if it takes sex for you to know what I already do, then so be it. Your place or mine, he said with a smirk, already heavily laden with lust. The man leaned down and captured Bruce's lips in a scorching kiss that had Bruce's toes curling in his boot. They him before walking 2 parking spaces over to where his car was parked. Bruce's mind finally clicked, and he got into his car, following his mate out of the club parking lot and into Crescent Edge city limits. They pulled into an apartment complex and parked. Bruce got out and followed his mate into the building. Reese unlocked the door to his apartment and held it open for Bruce. No sooner than the door closed than Reese and Bruce pressed the door, lifting him up. Bruce wrapped his legs around Reese's narrow waist. Bruce tilted his head to the side as Reese licked a pat over his collarbone and up his neck. He moaned, but none of his former partners had made him feel like this. Oh, should I read chapter 7 or should I stop right there? Decisions. Let me see. What do y'all think on YouTube, TikTok? Should I read or should I stop? The author said, guess I will do it. Chapter 7. Reese didn't know where he wanted to start on the little wolf morsel. His body heated up and his skin tingled as he licked and nipped up the side of Bruce's neck. If this man really was his mate, he didn't want to screw up their mating. He leaned back from the wall, his arms around the hand down the outside of Bruce's thigh before he crossed over and repeated the action on his inner thigh. The gasp that came from his partner-to-be had his own hard cock leaking behind his leather pants. He moved to the foot of the bed and untied his partner's feet, setting them down on the floor next to the bed. Reese worked his way to the waistband of Bruce's leather pants as he lifted. The head was an angry red and a large vein wrapping around it. In Reese's mind, Bruce's cock was perfect. As he watched, A pool of pre-cum drizzled out of it and landed on his stomach. Reese needed to taste it. His want of this man had left long ago, leaving behind only his need. He leaned down and ran his tongue through the wetness on the beautifully sculpted stomach. Nectar of the gods, he thought as he swallowed another sip of it. Bruce's legs were still trapped in his pants, but Reese needed to taste everything this man had to give him. He leaned down again, only this time he took his lover's cock into his mouth all the way to the root. Below him, Bruce cried out as he arched off the bed, shoving his cock deeper into Reese's throat. He worked the muscles of his throat around the head of his cock, causing the wolf to thrash on the bed. Reese needed him with a desperation that he didn't understand. He released the cock and practically ripped the pants from Bruce's legs. As soon as Bruce was naked, he flipped Bruce onto his stomach before he relieved himself of his clothes. He climbed to the bed and over the small wolf. Lube, man, wait, lube, lube. Before the man beneath him had finished his sentence, his cock spurted his natural lubricant against the tight hole in front of it. Then seconds, the muscle loose. How perfect it felt. When he was fully seated inside Bruce, something clicked inside him. His wings shot out from their folded position in his back, just under the skin. Talons grew from his fingertips, his teeth elongated, and his eyes burned bright red. Reese wrapped an arm around Bruce's chest, pulling him up as he sat back on his heels. He was almost frantic in his thrust as Bruce mewed and groaned. "Oh, gods!" Bruce yelled. Reese was doing his best to watch his talons, not wanting to injure his newly found mate. But the reality of the moment was he wasn't going to last much longer. Neither his human nor his gargoyle side was going to last. With that knowledge in his head, his wings spread wide behind him before they wrapped tightly around both men. His normal dark gray, leathery, and scaled wings had changed. Now they were translucent, almost see through, with scales that were turning iridescent, changing colors. "It's starting, my new mate. Can you feel it?" Reese gasped as he closed his eyes, enjoying the sensation of their souls wrapping around each other. His wings tightened even more around them. They moved as if they had a moan. The tighter the wings wrapped around them, the closer their minds and souls intertwined. "You, yes, please. You are part of me, the missing piece of my soul. I am yours, Reese, only yours." Bruce replied between gasps and moans. Reese took him at his word and bit down on Bruce's shoulder without his hips ever stopping their thrusting movements. His wings loosened the tight grip they had on the two men, raised above the pair, and started to gently shake. Tiny iridescent scales rained down on them. Reese had heard his wings could do that, but he never imagined he would find his mate. They looked incredible. The tiny scales resembled glitter covering them both. "You are now my fated mate, my one and only from now until the end of our days." Reese knew he would have to answer some heavy questions from his mate, and maybe even to his mate's entire pack, but all of that could wait until the morning. All he wanted to do right then was curl around the small man. He gently pulled out of Bruce and headed to the bathroom. He returned with a damp cloth and cleaned the now sleeping man. Reese tossed the cloth toward the bathroom before he crawled into bed. But even as he closed his eyes, he knew there was danger out there. A danger so horrific they would do anything to get their hands on a shifter, and a gargoyle would be the icing on the cake. So he slept with one eye open, as always. Reese shifted to the center of the large bed, pulling his brand new mate to him. Bruce didn't wake up. He only turned over to face Reese, nuzzling his face in the crook of his neck, inhaling deeply before he settled. And there I am going to end. So, TikTok, this is Healing His Heart. It's book 3 in the Crescent Edge pack. It's by L.N. Manning. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. Um, I know it's free on KU. Sherry, can you tell me, or Miss Manning, can you tell me how much it is? I know it's free on KU, but how much is it? At least on all the other platforms. For those that are new to my $3.99 to buy, okay? Y'all, somebody must have just turned me in. I just got live access. It's suspended for violating our community guidelines. I was waiting for that. I just submitted an appeal. Who knows? I got one diamond. Well, somebody gifted me. How many of you are oh my gosh, that is awesome. How many of you are fans of TikTok? If anybody is, and you know Granny Gertie, that's the dude. he dresses up in this. He's got a goatee, and he dresses up in an old granny wig, and he wears this. I think it's a flowery apron. He's in a dress, and like an old granny, and he's as southern as cornbread, y'all. I mean, he's good, and he's hilarious. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize that was him watching. I'm fangirling, y'all. I'm telling you, I'm fangirling. So, I'm sure I was waiting. While I was reading it, I was afraid I might get in trouble for it. TikTok can be tougher than Facebook, y'all. Yeah, for reading a sex scene, I was afraid that might happen. TikTok's horrible. I had 235 viewers, and I got one new follower, and he gave me a diamond. He gifted me a diamond. That's just awesome. I've not gotten into the gift giving and all that because I haven't spent any money on TikTok except to buy books. So it's kind of like when I buy books, I just like I'm going to have to go through and get the first two books to go with this one. Ms. Manning, you are giving me, Lord have mercy. I gotta get this to my twin. I have a twin that's also, well, he's he's technically not my twin. We're twins by different mothers. Let's put that in different fathers. Anyway, he if you're familiar with the author Blake Allwood, he is I got to get him to read these. He will love these. That is hilarious. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I can't believe it. I'm fangirling, y'all. I love his stuff. Alrighty. So, anybody that enjoys my live reads, I've got them again next week. Oh, I love Blake. He is my sweetheart. That's my boo thing. That's my twin. He's from Tennessee originally, and I'm from here in Georgia, just south of Chattanooga, Tennessee. And so I read his book, and it was just like, ooh. And his. So, all right, everybody, have a wonderful evening, and thank you so much for joining me. And I know I keep looking up at my screen. You just tend to look at yourself when you're on video, and I should be looking at my camera. So, you guys have a wonderful night and a wonderful weekend, and come join me again next week. I don't know who I got. I'll have to figure that out between now and then, but I'll be on here Wednesday and Thursday next week. So come on back and see what's going on. Well, talk to you later. Have a good weekend. Happy reading.